we are failing our generations and even generations to come. Because the Africans are basically the first people on this universe. What do people think Africans were doing for all that time? That's where they were discovering, they were doing things. I mean, one of the deepest mines in the world that was discovered more than 4,000 years ago is in Eswatini.
You know, Sasraza Kama once said, a nation without a past is a lost nation, and it's also a nation without a soul. I bring you as someone who's done a deep research on one of our heroes. You'll learn more about why we say he's a hero in Africa, or in Southern Africa specifically, King Mzilikazi, Nthebe Molope. Am I saying properly Molope? Is it Molope or Malope, or how do you say it?
Molope. I chose the story of Mzilikazi because I saw him as the greatest leader in Southern Africa and who made up the history of Southern Africa. Other people who had volunteered to write history on our behalf besmirched us when they were writing history. Because they knew what they had done, they made sure that they must have decoys as they write history. Naming is part of the violence that came from Europe, where they find a place and they say, this is Bechuana land. Who is consulted when you say this is Bechuana land?
Africa's prominent areas of heritage like Victoria Falls, Lake Victoria. Why do we struggle to change from Victoria Falls to Musiwa Tunya?
I was saying the same thing to the guys in Eastern Cape. I said, this sounds like a poor England because it's a very impoverished part of the country, but it's got all sorts of English names.
Yeah, but East London.
From Port Elizabeth. And by the way, that Port Elizabeth, it was not even named after Queen Elizabeth. It was named after somebody's girlfriend. Europeans always talk about Greece, but they don't mention that Greece land out of Africa. All those Socrates, Lebo Plato, and so on, get dropouts somewhere Africa.
Dropouts.
I am glad that you go into religion, whenever people pray, they call out the African God, Bar Amen.
Hey, gonna learn what Amen is actually an African word.
Absolutely, it's an African God. Our history has got a lot of gaps. It has left a whole lot of things that relate to us. And that is why our children don't take an interest in history, because it tells them of Napoleon Bonaparte, but it does not tell them of Molapo Abaja.
Welcome to the GrowthWell Podcast, where we tap into a well of knowledge, innovation, and leadership to fuel Africa's growth. Here, we explore thought-provoking insights and expert knowledge that empower individuals and businesses to thrive across the continent. Whether it's personal development or professional advancement, our conversations inspire action and impact. This is GrowthWell, where ideas flow and growth begins. Let's dive in.
Okay, here we go again. This is GrowthWell Podcast. We're back, and this time we're exploring history. Our heroes. Do we take them seriously? Do we research them? Do we actually see or investigate how they impact even on our soul and our leadership? You know, Sasraza Kama once said, a nation without a past is a lost nation, and it's also a nation without a soul. I've always bought into this famous quote by Sasraza Kama, and I believe that if we don't know where we're coming from, we will clearly be lost. I even connected to even just picking litter on the ground, being someone who's a good citizen. It's reflected in how you know where you're coming from. Recently, I just went to Livingstone in Zambia. And while I was there, obviously I went to the Victoria Falls. And I was just, and I was with some Americans who were actually visiting the area, some Black Americans. And when we went into, on the Zambia side of Victoria Falls, we saw this huge statue of David Livingstone. And we're like, wow. Just on reflection, how do we have one of the biggest statues in Africa reflecting this missionary who's very, very controversial, by the way. But to explore this deeper and deeper, I bring you as someone who's done a deep research on one of our heroes. You'll learn more about why we say he's a hero in Africa, or in Southern Africa specifically, King Mzilikazi. So to explore this, I bring you Nthebe Molope. Am I saying properly Molope? Is it Molope or Malope, or how do you say it?
Molope.
Molope.
Ke noyana e mokgatlo o molele.
No, welcome, Molope.
Agerara.
All the way from South Africa. And you are here to launch the book, King Mzilikazi. And I'm so happy because as we explored before the podcast started, what I really think we need this big time, as reflected by Kama's statement.
No, indeed. No, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure, and thank you for welcoming me here. I've been going around in different places talking about this book, and what I normally do is I talk about the book in relation to the area. You know, when I was in Polokwane, I did the same about what Mzilikazi's impact there was.
In that area.
I'm still to go to Mozambique, where he had been as well, and Eswatini, where there's even places named after him.
In Eswatini?
Eswatini. There's a place called Siteki, and that's to Siteki, which is on the border between Mozambique and Swaziland. There's a place called Mzilikazi. So, yeah, Botswana as well.
We'll explore all the places.
It's Tswanified. Botswana.
Mzilikazi. No, we'll explore it. You even went to Mulapa Wojang. But I mean, I'm fascinated. I didn't know that he actually went as far as Mozambique. You even mentioned Zambia and Namibia in terms of his influence, in terms of sphere of influence. It's so huge in Southern Africa.
Yes. He's a Southern African hero, basically.
Now, before we start, let's have the viewers just understand who's Molope and where you're coming from. Why this? Why this intense? I mean, I read that you took 5.5 years to research on Mzilikazi. I mean, there must be some inner drive to do such an intensive research.
No, yes. In fact, because I'm busy sweeping up now, we'll call this year 7.
Year 7.
So it took me 6 years to go through this. Firstly, I am a self-taught historiographer. I prefer to be referred to as a historiographer rather than a historian, because historians generally study history and its impact on people and how it happened. But historiographers question why certain things happened the way they did. And they try and get deeper meaning of issues around history.
Like that.
As an example, one of the things that I question in the history, as I read in this book, is Difaqane Mfecane. Historians, many of them, have been regurgitating this issue of Mfecane. But I chose to say, but what is this Mfecane and how did it happen? And because there were so many different groups of people already at that time, the Dutch and the English were already there. How come that this Mfecane was just chasing after Africans?
African leaders.
Yes. How come that they were at the hard end of the stick in terms of the reception of this Mfecane Difaqane? So yeah, that's who I am. I don't have any formal history qualifications. But
I'm sure professorship is on the way somewhere. Looking at the intensity of the book.
I've been hearing that rumor for some time.
You just want it to become reality.
And I must say I'm also quite humbled because there's been several universities that have been asking me to come and do the presentation. And the next one being going to be Roma in Lesotho, where I'll be going in August. Because Mzilikazi also passed there, by the way. Yes. And so, it's the reason that I actually started this whole journey, of which people like to ask, why am I writing about Zulu history when I am not Zulu? And of course, my first take is that this is not Zulu history. It's African history. And I think I have the qualification to write African history by virtue of my being African. And one of the other interests that I have around it is that other people who had volunteered to write history on our behalf besmirched us when they were writing history. Because they were doing two things. Because they knew what they had done, they made sure that they must have decoys as they write history. So that you must not be able to follow what they have done. I mean, one of the first things is that the war of dispossession, which happened in South Africa, was a almost 100-year war of the Boers and the English fighting the Xhosas, pushing them all the way from Cape Town and fighting first the Khoi, pushing them out of the Cape right into almost the area closer to what is today Zululand. And with
further
all
north,
that,
on the coast, further north.
Absolutely. And then various stories that keep on coming do not speak at length about that detail. I mean, as they were doing that, they called the place, one of the places, British Kaffraria. And then they pushed them out again, and then they said they were in Kaffraria proper.
Proper?
Yes. You know, so they became in charge of British Kaffraria. So the British were staying in that area, which belongs to the Kaffrs there. And
so
now,
that Kaffraria is related to Kaffr?
Absolutely.
Is it?
Absolutely. And that's why that name disappeared so quickly, you know, as part of this decoy. And then when African people begin to now invest, just to qualify that, what they then did is that they then put up all this information in various places, in the schools, in the universities, in the libraries, so that if you try and contest it, it can always be proven in a book that this indeed has happened. So if you go and study your master's and your PhD, you find that, but here is this thing. In the movies, for entertainment, you would go and see Shaka Zulu. And by the way, I don't know who Shaka Zulu is, for the record, because I hear there's a person called Shaka Zulu. First of all, it was not appreciated and that he was to be called Shaka, because it was seen as a curse, as an insult.
Is it?
Yes.
In the Zulu?
Absolutely.
Is it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because his real name was Mliloana.
Okay.
That's how his mother referred to him. In fact, in this new movie that is playing called Ilembe, he's referred like that, as Mliloana.
Now the movie done from the right context,
That's
from an
correct.
African perspective.
That's correct. And later he was nicknamed Ilembe.
Ilembe, yes. I see in the book you refer a lot to Ilembe.
Which is an X.
Okay.
And that's why when they praise him, they say Ilembe le kamanya malembe ngokhalipha, the sharpest X in the house.
Nice.
And so then this name Shaka stood, and then they even now are calling him Shaka Zulu. Now, my question was, who is Zulu in this instance? Is that a surname?
Yes, yeah.
Because all we know is that Shaka's father was Senzanga Khona. And he's generally referred to as Ushaka Senzanga Khona.
As the surname, the father is Senzanga Khona.
Which is, yes, which is
the right way of...
reference to your lineage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, and everybody else, even Udingane, is Udingane ka Senzanga Khona. So it seems like it's only Shaka who's got a surname Zulu. We've got Mhlangana, who was also the brother, because Udingane and Mhlangana were the two who planned and assassinated Shaka.
Shaka, yes. So now, I wanted you to, because the readers, some of them don't even know who Dingane kind of took from Shaka. After Shaka was assassinated.
Yeah. In English, they say he was a half-brother, but Ronam, in Africa, we don't know anything that people that are referred to in fractions.
So either you're a brother, you're a brother.
You're a brother or you're not a brother.
Not three-quarter and a half.
Three-quarter brother and a half brother. You know, I mean, you cannot be mathematical in talking about family, you know. Yeah. So he was Shaka's brother. And of course, without going much into detail around
you're trying
that
to
family,
give us the context of being a historiographer, or you are trying to challenge these stories that were told by others.
Yes. And as you can see, I start with this one of Ilembe.
I see there's a lot of Ilembe. I was going to ask you, what is this Ilembe story? Because now he's a Shaka Zulu and his war tactics of lion and horn and all that. And there's always an element of violence.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll come to Mzilikazi as well, how we perceive him in Botswana.
Yes. No, that's true. That's why I was saying that the way the colonizers did this, they planned it very well, such that you can always, your point of reference is still made by them. So that when you go to the point of reference, when you come from a point of oral history and oral traditions, it becomes very difficult to withstand that, because then the first issue that people will say, but Africans don't write. So, I mean, why are you telling us that this is... And actually, I saw it in a book. Yeah. And I saw the book
is the Bible. Yes. That's it. You can't challenge that.
I saw the movie. You know, in the movie, this is what... So it is the same people who have made it, and they are presenting it from different perspectives. And then, so you know, in academic world, they talk about triangulation. So they actually triangulate. So from different points where you want to try and reference, it brings you to the same point.
Conclusion.
Yes, you know. I mean, but only when, which is what I did in terms of the book, I used what is called primary literature, which is the first type of writings which were done by either the missionaries, the traders, the slavers, the killers. And then I look at the secondary literature, which is the others who wrote immediately thereafter. And then I look at also what is available in current literature. And then also oral history, oral traditions, is Bongo, is Tagazelo, Diboko,
Maboko, yes.
And through that, a number of things either get confirmed or get washed away. And then, but one thing that I have appreciated is that generally in pre-colonial times, there had been fallouts and people would have skirmishes and so on. But there were no large-scale wars, as we had seen. Frantz Fanon...
You mean these Mfekanes were Runarabonadi Chaka and spears flying, guys occupying each other's territories, all this and that.
Yes.
That's been exaggerated. I mean, are you...
No. I'm saying, again, out of primary literature, they themselves in their diaries say that they found the place peaceful. They say so themselves. So unless they deny it, you know, then they say that, no, those diaries were wrong. You know, I mean, the first people, King, who met Shaka, they said when they reached that coastland, they found it clean and peaceful and orderly as they came and met Shaka. So the violence was imported. And this is exactly what Frantz Fanon says. He says colonialism was very violent. And he says to remove colonialism, you must also be violent. Well, I can't say I agree completely with that, but I would say there's an element of truth also in that. Because, and the violence was in various ways, including what we were talking about earlier, the names. Naming is part of the violence that came from Europe, where they find a place and they say, this is Bechuana land. You know, who is consulted when you say this is Bechuana land? Today, our country still got a direction for a name. And it is the same people who gave it.
But Northwest.
Yes,
I mean, a whole people of Botswana and their area is called Northwest.
Absolutely.
As we know, there are more Botswana in South Africa than Botswana. And,
true.
I mean, huge. I mean, right from Tabanchu to the edges of Limpopo.
Across,
and you're called Northwest.
Yes. No, I mean...
You're right.
That's the thing.
Ridiculous.
We haven't taken over from, from
the colonizers.
From the colonizers. They find Ngome and they call it Blood River.
That's the Battle of Blood River. That's where it was.
It was fought at Ngome. Now,
and just because they killed the Zulus and left, it was all bloody. Now they call it the...
Yes. So is
the river called Blood River even today?
Well, it depends who's speaking.
Hey, this historiographer. No, that's fine. I think let's stop with the Molope so that we take one. The one thing that I wanted on a lighter note is the fact that Okabo, obviously you are relating to Botswana now. And I like the way that you already started with your little praise. And I wanted something where kante bakhatla. We obviously ke morolo na, and then we have Bangwaketse and so forth. But there's something about Bokhabo in terms of how they speak. There's always an edge of Bovaganyana Moting. They're very blunt. Now I'm going back to Khosile Ntswi and that, and even the modern day.
Yes.
So just where does that come from, historiographer?
You know how you call Lesotho? But you call Lesotho when they use profanities. Barabahoboka.
Yes.
So, in other words, don't take offense.
No, absolutely.
But you're not the first person to say that around what Bakhatla's tendencies. And Bakhatla are in about 8 different groupings. Bamanana,
kaMashobane,
they are the only Bakhatlas who are not have got a branch go Africa Bor. But Babamba both Bakhatla are to be found out there. And but so people have taken up different experiences in terms of their life experience, because as you would know, Pilani had a very rough time. Mzilikazi. Pilani had a relationship le Mahrikwa. Yes. And then he decided that he will ask Mahrikwa or bamu thuse go lwantsha Mzilikazi ba mo ntshe mo nageng ya gagwe. And Mzilikazi had already been settled more Mokhatleng, and basically also given some level of protection. And then now, when Pilan, who had been trading matlalo, carrosses, the carrosses katsona, le Mahrikwa. Then he said, "No man, can you help me chase this man out of here?" Mahrikwa said, "No problem." And then there was a man called Baron Barense.
Okay.
And he came Lebanabach. Now, the Griquas were some of the first non-European people to mount horses and to carry guns. And incidentally, they were also dressing like the Afrikaners. So they came, and when they came in their numbers, Batswako next to Northern Cape.
Yes, I know the Northern Cape areas there.
Go Gilsdraft. And then they were momentarily based go Makwasi. Makwasi is also given some other funny name.
Africans.
Etliengaskepe.
Gamokoro.
So they were staying there. Batusa Pilan. When they arrived, Mzilikazi was nowhere to be found, even le maswale a gagwe. So as they arrived, they found, because Mzilikazi had a lot of cattle. Now they found cattle for Africa. And they decided to take this cattle and decide, now we found what we wanted.
Okay, they couldn't find Mzilikazi, but they found the cattle.
They found the cattle.
Okay.
They killed Badisa, and then they started driving the cattle
away,
But a place called Mo Tokoha Pitidi Suleyan Le Mosega.
Mosega, yes.
And then now they were driving these cattle from Kako to Kosa Pitsidisula Yamba Feta. I can imagine Gobo Murulem going further down towards.
Can I Pitsidisula Jan? There's around Pilansberg area, around or Mariko, those areas.
Yes. Actually, when you go from Muruleng, Otsamaya, Lo Feta go towards Bo Sosobe, Ekaroela towards Madikwe River from the side of South Africa.
Okay.
Utlofitla go Pitsidisule go khonale some place ba re ke Mankaipa. So then as they were driving this cattle, they were certain that Mzilikazi has disappeared at Sabadi ditlhobolo tsa bona. So they walked for 2 days. Nothing happened. On the third day, they took a break at a place just close to a cross from Sun City, Barkitsitsi. So ba fitla ko banna and ba simula lo go sega dikgomo tseo to start eating and braaiing and having a good time that we have now managed to take over the wealth ya Mzilikazi. And then they say they had captured some Bakatla women as well. So
the Griquas captured Bakatla, whom they have come and assist.
No, as they were going to attack Mzilikazi, now they found these women Babatopa now as almost as trophies.
Okay, got you.
So these Bakatla women are said to have been telling this Griquas, you must be careful of Mzilikazi. As you are relaxing like this, and these guys said, this has been 3 days. We've been going around here. We have not seen a sign. It's fine. Apparently at about 2 in the morning, when they were now pretty drunk and full of meat, the horses tethered on the trees and so on, Mzilikazi appeared le masole a gagwe. They attacked these Griquas, and they only saw them apparently when they were less than 100 meters away from them. And they could do nothing because their guns were not in their hands and so on. And some who got guns, in their panic, they started shooting each other because it was also dark.
Yeah.
And even and so the horses, as this happened with the chaos, were trampling over these guys. And Baranse, by the way, was at Makwasi waiting for a report. So only 2 guys managed to escape with their lives. So they could have all been wiped out. So when they got to Baranse and reported what happened, and he goes back to the greater Griqua community, they said, no, but you are telling us nonsense. You guys were killed with people with no guns and nothing. And you have got horses and guns. And people have been massacred like that. So that's what actually started to lead to the demise of the Baranse section. Because the Griquas were also breaking away. Because all those tensions, everybody wanting to be a leader. But the Baranse group then started to really face its demise. And Ilohora, they had been the first attack, almost similar, of the Griquas on Mzilikazi. And he chased them almost right up to the Free State.
Okay.
Close to
the earlier days when Mzilikazi were around.
Before the British came. The Dutch came. So when he chased them right up to Garib, which is called the Orange. For some reason.
The Orange, yes.
It's called the Orange because of the Prince of Orange. Netherlands. Yes. Because the Dutch were remembering their home and now naming.
That's where the orange comes from.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
And it's very interesting that Orange himself had ran away from Netherlands when the French took over Netherlands. And the only message that he sent was that, we are busy taking over South Africa, the South. So he ran from Netherlands to England.
To England, yes. I know that he was there in England. Yeah.
Then he told the English, can you do us a favor? Make sure that you take over that Cape, which we had already taken over. Because if the French take it over, so you see, we could also have been French-speaking now.
We could have been French, Portuguese. We talked about Portuguese.
The country was just up for the taking.
For grabs, yeah.
So the English then went there and took over. But the local Boers were not impressed because they were basically saying, but we found this country ourselves. And so they started fighting. So basically the fallout started in 1795.
Okay.
So by 1820, when the British came in large numbers, and which was called the settlers, they had already been there for some time. And this friction happened and grew up until they had the Anglo-Boer War in 1898.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to go right second. Remember, we are going back to Pilani and Bokhabo and how Bokhabo, why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
Are you still getting there or Kapoy Dodge?
No. You know, as the wind flows, you get blown away. No, Bokhabo, they I think out of our history and also the impact of Mzilikazi having stayed there, we learned a number of things. And one of them is that we must be assertive.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Where does this come from? This assertiveness, this candid talk, and, being blunt.
No, Mzilikazi pushed Pilani around quite a bit. And the people learned, and that is why even when the fallout started with Maburu, with the Dutch. After Banaba Khamanyane had crossed over Madiko into Botswana, they got the help from Livingstone, and that is why that mission house in Botswana was bombed, Maburu, because they were saying, no, you are busy giving guns to these guys. And Bakata, even though they were told by the British, or no, you are not supposed to be using guns. You are just going to be support. When they got the guns, they said, no, this is our turn to go and avenge
the Boers.
The way what they did to Khamanya. And so that assertiveness basically has stayed. It has become something
part of ingrained in their soul.
Absolutely.
That takes us to the big question then. And we discussed this before we started here, Hore. Again, going back to Sarasa Khama's statement, I read and admire how the West have got their cardinal points very clear. They always go back to, for instance, they say there are two centers for them. That's Athens from a science perspective, and the Socrates and the Aristotles. There is another center which is Jerusalem, where they got their moral compass. And for them, that's been the guiding thing. And all that has evolved through the Renaissance, the Enlightenment period, and all that coming to today, where they know exactly where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And then Africa, where are our points? And the question is, how does history play a part in making a nation a pride one, a one tatang? Because for me, that fits onto how you develop.
Yeah.
Because if you are fake, how do you expect to be authentic and actually do and be very genuine about developing your people? That's really the connection. So I just want to ask you, how history, what from your research, what role does it play in all that?
History is very, very important. And maybe just to tag on to what you were saying about those two cardinal points of the Europeans, it's interesting because that's an abridged version. In that the John Henry Clark says that Europeans always talk about Greece and what they learned out of Greece, but they don't mention that Greece learned out of Africa.
Oh, there's a connection between Athens and Africa.
Yes, they were students. All those Socrates, Lebo Plato, and so on, dropouts somewhere Africa.
Dropouts.
They did not finish their time of study. the guys who were studying in Africa were doing about 20 years because you were studying engineering, medicine, astronomy.
That's incredible, eh?
They were studying all
when you
those
read
things.
Aristotle,
Yes.
chemistry, biology, to how to live, to sociology.
That's a true study. That's a true student of Africa.
Student, eh?
Yeah, Africa. Because
Tell me about it.
That's what they were taught in Africa. There's a book that I was reading here, Obenga, Theophile Obenga.
Mm-hmm.
I struggled to find it in English. I found it in French. I had to read it in French. And he talks about even the amount of money. In fact, that small children's book that you
gave me, the one that you wrote, yes.
It's got that bit of that story about the Dashmas, which was the money that was used in Athens then.
Mm-hmm.
They were paying 2 Dashmas
to
travel from Athens to Cairo to come to school.
Mm-hmm.
So they were being taught there. After they were taught, one of the great thank yous that they did is that they bent the library in Alexandria.
Yes. I know that big library, historic library.
Yes, Aristotle Baba Ifisa.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, out of the time Aristotle came out of there, he suddenly had written more than 200 books. And maybe some of us are too slow, that it's taken me 6 years to write one book. Aristotle wrote 200 books in record time. And he wrote those books after Atswako Africa. And when you look at that, it's plagiarism of the highest order. Because the things that that's why I'm saying their points of focus, of reference.
Yeah.
They even summarize it. They don't tell us the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The second one, on the religious side, I am glad that you go into religion. Whenever people pray, they call out the African God, but Amen.
Can I learn what Amen is actually an African word?
Absolutely. It's an African God out of Kemet, ancient Egypt.
Ancient Egypt, yeah.
So, if it's all rapela,
and we don't know this.
We don't know this. I'm coming to the point of history
yes.
And how it is taught. So the victors have been teaching history from antiquity till now in the same way. So the people who have taken over in liberation time are carrying on with the evangelism of the colonial master. Our history has got a lot of gaps. It has left a whole lot of things that relate to us. And that is why our children don't take an interest in history, because it tells them of Napoleon Bonaparte and tells them of people and names that they find difficult in mentioning. But it does not tell them of Molapo Abaja. Right here.
And the Battle of Dimao.
It does not exactly.
Or King Sechele.
Yes. So
he's chief. He's not even a king.
Yes. Because when they came here, they said, no, we've got kings, Morotswa Mote. So Ba, which we find here, cannot be the equals of our leaders. These are chiefs. And our people take up those titles and use them.
Even today.
The
guys that went to Harvard and went to all these beautiful schools.
Absolutely. They still
let alone pride and saying being called sir.
You get knighted, which means you are actually taken even lower.
You're lower than a king.
Yeah. When you are being knighted, you are not being elevated. They say now you are properly under our feet. We are knighting you. Yes. And so we are failing our generations and even generations to come. Because we are not showing what it is that Africa has done, how it has contributed to the world. I mean, John Henrik Clark says one other important thing. He says, because the Africans are basically the first people on this universe. And we know that, for instance, the African gene is not recessive. So if a black and a black mother and a black father were to meet, the child will be black. If a black and a white meet, the child will not be white.
You'll be regarded as black.
Yes,
and all the so to speak color.
For all intents and purposes, is likely to be of a different shade, but will not be white. But because the white gene is recessive, so that nation is not able to grow, because this one, the black gene is much stronger and it progresses and it multiplies. And so he says, of all those years, because Africans were there first, what do people think Africans were doing for all that time? He says that's where they were discovering, they were doing things. I mean, one of the deepest mines in the world that was discovered more than 4,000 years ago is in Eswatini.
Mines?
A mine.
4,000 years ago?
4,000 years ago. The oldest bone that has got mathematical markings, the Ishango bone, is found in the Congo, which confirms that Africans were doing mathematics those many years ago. It's so there are many markers that shows you all of those things. That's what Africans were doing. There is a book which is called the Side of the Sun at Noon. I like that book very much.
Say it again.
The Side of the Sun.
The Side of the Sun at Noon.
Yes.
The Side of the Sun at Noon.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
I'll remember the name of the author now. But she says, one of the things that is thought that the Khoi and the San people could have been doing in terms of the artistry that they did, that it is most likely that they were actually marking and doing those drawings on the stones with diamond.
The hardest thing.
The hardest thing.
Yeah.
And then they had the mixtures of different soil and
Plants.
colorings, and they actually put it in there so that then the drawings stayed for
centuries and centuries.
They are still there today. And what is interesting is that those drawings are all over Africa. In the Nile Valley, they are there. In Libya, in Morocco, in Mauritania,
all the way to Botswana,
Ghana,
South Africa, everywhere. They're everywhere.
They are everywhere, which shows you it is the same people. It is the same people with the same culture that had been there. So, but this is not mentioned anywhere. That is why today, when you tell people that, this thing of Egypt had the north and the south, you know. Sudan was basically the south of Egypt.
Of Egypt, yeah.
One country. That is why they called it two lands, you know. And when you talk of the Upper Nile and the Lower Nile, of which people get confused. The Upper Nile is actually at the lower part.
The lower is not like towards Cairo and Alexandria. It's actually...
yes, because they talk of that, the upper and lower in relation to
the flow of the river,
where the lower
yes, because it flows into the Mediterranean.
Yes, the source. Absolutely. Yeah. So all of this we find that is not there at all, you know. And so our history, we have to really take good care of it and make sure that it is taught for the right reasons.
Is it our problem that we have not adequately documented it? I'm trying to dissect why that is the case. Did we slip on the job?
We did, because the first people who were responsible for managing it, they did it with a particular purpose. Now, we have just followed and done exactly what they have been doing. Either, you know, and by basically really sleeping on the job, because we could have done better. And we still have a chance of doing better. You know, I take at any point in time a book of history in South Africa of African children. I still find Jan van Riebeeck sitting pretty there.
Is it?
Yes.
1652.
1652.
Everywhere. We all know it. Even Botswana, which was not part of the apartheid thing. Jan van Riebeeck.
Yes.
I never forget the Boston Tea Party, 1776. Those are things. Tsar of Russia. All
absolutely.
that we can recite.
It's there. I mean, you know.
But like you said, it was a program.
It was a program.
It was someone's agenda
Precisely.
that won the day.
Precisely.
And now it's time for us to
You know,
reverse, yeah.
Hugh Masekela used to say, he actually had a song which is called Vasco da Gama, the Sailor Man. I don't know whether you know it.
Mm-mm.
It says Vasco da Gama, the Sailor Man, invented discoveries.
Mm.
And when you see that, you can see exactly what has happened. All the people who were inventing discoveries.
Inventing discoveries, that's the way
Yes.
to put it. Yeah, and it really pains me. I mean, the fact that Africa's prominent areas of heritage, like, even in Victoria Falls, Lake Victoria. I mean, how do those not reflect the people in those spaces? You know, why do we struggle to change from Victoria Falls to Musiwa Tunya?
It's original. It's original.
That's what I mean. But I mean, we are the leaders. Why is there a struggle to I mean, people always telling me, hey, mana, we are poor, we don't have money to do this. I said, you know, if we don't change the psychology, then the poor aspects will carry on.
No, absolutely.
That's really my philosophy.
No, absolutely.
Like, I mean, I told you what my mother is from Ghana, so I've got cousins in South Africa.
Yes.
And they, married. So the guy only just like, hey, naga like it's a go pampir start. Kapa will maran start.
No,
and I'm like, guys, no, man. This is just, I mean, when you drive around Northwest, I mean, the names.
No, the violence is big.
Even in Cape Town, I once drove around Cape Town, it's like, this, like, we could be in Somerset, we could be in the UK.
It's violence.
This is the place of the choir, this is the place of the Xhosa.
I was saying the same thing to the guys in Eastern Cape. I said, this sounds like a poor England.
Absolutely.
Because it's a very impoverished part of the country, but it's got all sorts of English names.
Yeah, but East London.
From Port Elizabeth. And by the way, that Port Elizabeth, it was not even named after Queen Elizabeth. It was named after somebody's girlfriend. That's an insult.
It's a pure insult.
The violence is vile. And
and violence of the mind.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's violence of the mind.
Absolutely. You know, it's
painful.
Yeah.
Let's move on before we start. King Mzilikazi. So
kaMashobane.
kaMashobane. And you have to define for me why the name kaMashobane. I don't know about Timela. Timela kasi Zulu listen Ndebele. So just define why him out of all the other people that decided I'm going to do a study and research on Mzilikazi.
Yeah.
So if you can just unpack that for us.
You see, part of the thing that we do in our language, our history, our culture, we lose ourselves. I know that in deep Setswana and in Sepedi, when you refer to yourself, I must say Nthebe Molope. Yes, which means I'm son of Khope.
Yes. No, that's true.
My father's name.
Yes, that's correct.
So we've lost that.
Yeah, actually, you're true. You're right. We've lost that.
So in the Nguni language, they say ka.
Aha, got you.
Yes, Mzilikazi, kaMashobane.
Yes.
Kamangete.
Okay.
Yes. So just and the Ngunis have been very particular in terms of keeping that history, because I was very impressed when we went now to Kanye, and they were showing us the names Mepato, which are written out there, and they even show that Mepato was of which year and which year and which year, because then this pride which we're talking about is about linking with history just from introduction. You know, so it leads you to where the clan locates itself. Yes. You know, when you say ke, in other words, ke Khabo. You know, I venerate the velvet monkey, not any monkey. Bahurutsi ke lecha because we border the game reserve. So we are always having unwanted visitors. The Khabo, the Tshweni, the Tlago, the Pa, the Namune, the Rona, and so on. So Hardi Bona Bahurutsi Kiba. So you know. So basically, I chose the story of Mzilikazi because I saw him as the greatest leader in Southern Africa.
Really?
And who made up the history of Southern Africa with his movements and in a variety of ways. One thing I will not discount is that in the 1830s, from around the 1820s and so on, after the violence that was imported from Europe, the places became very violent. And one of the things that people then did, which also Elizabeth Eldridge admits to, is that people started to make what was called defensive states. So Makhosi then had to make sure that they gather themselves and protect themselves against anything that would come, which is exactly what Ilembe did. People were being captured to the east of where they are, Mozambique. They were taken and made slaves. People were being taken even up to as deep as Venda by the Portuguese and made slaves. They were taken and taken to Brazil to work in the sugar canes. Sugar, that's correct. And in fact, when you will see in the book, I actually quote where they say at one stage, Mozambique was almost depleted of its populace because of the way in which
of the slave
of the of that
and that was earlier than the Ghana. The West Africa slavery. This one was much earlier. Was around the
some
same
of
time.
It was almost the same time. Others, we're just following on each other. Okay. Because remember that South Africa, they actually discovered by accident. That 1450 attack of the Portuguese, they basically got there because they were trying to see what is it that they can do from there, because they had been passing all the way going into what was called Delagoa Bay, which today is known as Maputo.
Maputo, yeah.
And then they found that they could get there and they can also take that over. Unfortunately, our Khoi brothers attacked them, and they then killed the general that was most highly decorated, the Almeida. And out of that, the Portuguese then stayed far away from South Africa since then.
Okay.
For over 300 years. They never came.
After they lost in
that battle. So what happened is that all those battles that were happening were now moving towards the East Coast. And when that caught wind, the people there said we must rather be better prepared so that when this war comes, we must be able to defend ourselves. And that's how these defensive states happen.
Okay. And the militarization.
They militarize, absolutely. In fact, in the book, I say that the issue of Zululand was a militarization that went wrong. Because now they had been, people are armed, basically, in that area. There's a place called the Nkandla Forest, the very Nkandla, which is known
famous
for different reasons today. Was actually a forest where they were making those spears. So it basically became a factory where they were producing arms to protect themselves. Now you can imagine, just like we have today in South Africa with the proliferation of guns, that what then happens thereafter. But then out of that, Mzilikazi's defensive state became a different type of defense state. It became a roving defensive state. Mzilikazi. So he moved with those people as he was defending himself. Because the people that he actually fought against, first of all, the Boers, he mainly fought against them because they were trespassing at Verkop. They were
trespassing. Mzilikazi was already there.
There.
Just before you carry on there, because the audience could also be wondering, because I was relating the bringing of the violence, the militarization, and then what happened between Shaka and Mzilikazi. So that then we can connect to his movements before he started moving. What was the fallout? Okay. Basically, the little origin of, in brief, just the origin of Mzilikazi actually breaking away from the Zulus, from the Umshaka.
Okay, first of all, we have to realize that Mzilikazi was not Zulu by origin.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a new one.
He was a Khumalo.
It was a Khumalo.
Yes.
There are people called the Khumalo.
The Khumalos. They call themselves after some of their grandfathers, Amantungwa, Umtungwa. That's why when you greet a Khumalo and you say Umtungwa, they acknowledge you.
Okay.
Now, Amantungwa were basically part of the paramountcy, which was led by Zwide. So under Zwide, just to give you a little geography of the area where they lived, they lived close to the Pongola River, which is flowing towards Mozambique, and they also lived next
These are just for the people that this is just north of Richards Bay and Durban, just to give them a context of the popular names.
That's correct.
Yeah. That's where the Pongola River is.
Yes. And then there's also Mfolozi River.
Yeah.
So Mfolozi splits into two. There's Mfolozi Mnyama, which is the black Mfolozi, and Mfolozi Mhlophe, which is the white Mfolozi.
Okay.
So now next to the Mfolozi Mhlophe, that's where the clan of Shaka's nation came from.
Okay.
The Zulu, but they were under a king called Dingizwayo.
Oh, Dingizwayo, yeah.
So now Mzilikazi's father, kaMashobane, together with the other Khumalos, because there was also the three different Khumalos. We are basically cousins.
Okay.
We're also living under this area together with Soshangane, with Nqaba, with Zwangendaba, who in their own right were generals.
Okay.
But now Mzilikazi was born in the homestead of Zwide, because Zwide's daughter was Mzilikazi's mother.
Okay.
Which was also some way of making peace, because when the Khumalos arrived there and they found that type of a setup, they actually became part of that paramountcy, and to make that peace sort of arrangement, Zwide's daughter was allowed to be married to kaMashobane. But then there was friction between the paramountcy of Zwide and the paramountcy of Dingizwayo. And so out of that friction, part of the reasoning is that because of the location of Zwide, he was closer to Delagoa Bay. So he was able to trade with the Portuguese.
Yeah.
And you can go even further, that the trading had been happening for quite some time, because the Africans had been trading with China, as you can know about Mapungubia and so on. And so there was a whole lot of trading but now this trade route was basically not to be accessed by the people of Shaka, of Dingizwayo. And so out of all those friction, when the fallout happened, it is said that there was a trick that was made whereby Zwide invited Dingizwayo to come to speak peace. But when he came, he then killed him.
He killed Dingizwayo.
So
Zwide killed Dingizwayo.
Zwide killed Dingizwayo. Now, Shaka was being mentored by Dingizwayo. When he heard that Dingizwayo was killed, he wanted to go and avenge himself. And apparently he was stopped by Mzilikazi's father. kaMashobane said, "You are young. Don't try and go there. This man will finish you." And so it was, the message is that he was then seen to be giving that message across. And so Dingizwayo Zwide became very agitated. After killing Dingizwayo, he then killed kaMashobane.
kaMashobane Rago Mzilikazi.
Yes. His son-in-law. He killed his son-in-law. And so kaMashobane's son, Mzilikazi, then decided there's no way I can
issue with Zwide now.
Continue staying in this, because if this guy can kill my father that so easily, and I was looking up to this man when I was growing, so I must rather go. And so he decided he must go and rather form an allegiance and an alliance with Shaka, who was basically on the other side of the Umfolozi. Remember, we spoke of the Umfolozi.
River,
so he went over Umfolozi, white Umfolozi, and went to join Shaka. And so Now he became a very valuable asset to Shaka because now he had the inside knowledge of how
Zwide.
yes.
Yeah.
So he fed them with intelligence, military strategies, and so on, so on. And so they became very close friends with Shaka. But now Shaka was 3 years older than Mzilikazi.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then Mzilikazi decided that no, in his head, he was very clear that no, I'm coming here for a particular reason. I'm moving away from that environment because there's no way I can live in this thing. But he also was then deciding that this man who's 3 years older than me can also not be my king. So I must now make my way and go.
Because he also came from a different lineage, Abo Zwide.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So then when he was going, the grey hairs in Zululand tell us that actually within the families, people were brewing this to have this conflict between the two. And so it was not going to be easy because they were friends. But now Shaka tried to find a way in which he can sort this thing. So he sent him to go and get cattle from Ranisi, who was a neighboring king of Basotho. So when he went there, Mzilikazi, Shaka gave him some support, but he gave him some elderly men to go and support him. And they say the reason was that he knew that these elderly men will be finished by Ranisi. They will kill them and they will also kill Mzilikazi.
Mm-hmm.
So Mzilikazi had a closer troop of armies that were, that always go with the king. And then he also took all those old men. So now the story that we hear out of Zululand is that when he got there, he decided that no, he must keep the old men. They must sit at the mountain top. And they will go at dusk. And they'll go to Ranisi. And then he goes with these young men, these young warriors. And then he asks for these cattle. Now, Ranisi wanted to resist. So he tells them, you know that wherever I go, I'm moving with Shaka and with Shaka's warriors. So there they are at the mountain top. So he points at these old men who are sitting there. So this guy just sees a lot of warriors. He does not know what they are.
What they are, yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're just elderly people.
Elderly, yeah, oldies.
Yes. So then apparently he tells him that no, to be able to save your life, go away quietly and leave the cattle. Because once you take the cattle, they're going to be seen that you are running away. So he left the cattle, and then the cattle were taken, mainly the white cattle, by Mzilikazi, and he went back to Shaka. But then he decided, no, these cattle, I'm not going to hand them over.
To Shaka?
Yeah, because I don't have a king anyway. And so Shaka started sending men to say, go and remind this man. Yes. So apparently some of the cattle he gave them to his uncles and so on. So they, with ancient stories, there are various versions, but he decided he was not going to give them. And then it is said that one of the times when Shaka sent his men to look for the cattle, he instructed the guys to take some of the older, the old cattle and said, slaughter this and give to these men by Shaka. As a return of the insult, to say, you gave me old men, so I'm going to give you old meat. Yes. So then when the fight happens, he then fought against these soldiers which were brought over by Shaka and defeated them. Okay. And Shaka brought the second group, and then he fought with them. He threw boulders on them, and then he was basically starting to overcome them. But he decided that this battle is becoming too much. And then that's how he left. He left and he ran off. Okay. Yes.
So they actually almost had a little war with.
Yes. They had a war. That's why one of the names that the Amantungu Abukhumalo are known for, they are called Amahlabezulu. So they bahlabana noZulu.
Bahlabana labazulu.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And more than once. Yes.
Okay, now you're taking us to how he was coming up with the Voortrekkers.
Yes.
Yeah. Was it around Free State somewhere?
Yes, there's a place called, next to a place called Hebron. It's called Vegkop. Veg is to Veg, it's a battle tool. So it's a battle hill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at Vegkop, these Boers were basically starting to encroach over Liqwa. This is a Khoi name, Liqwa.
Kwa.
Yeah, Liqwa is Leqwa.
Mm.
In Ndebele, they call it Iligwa, which is the Val. And this Val is a Dutch name out of the same Liqwa, because Liqwa means a dull river. So Dal in Dutch is Val.
Okay.
So basically, the violence continued there as well,
at the time, yeah.
to keep it as the Val. So they were encroaching over the Val and getting the hunting in that part of the Transvaal. You can imagine it was quite wild. So when they were doing that, because some of the first people who were going over the Val, they went to, because they were told, you must go and get permission from Mzilikazi, so they can allow you to hunt. And of course, when you get permission, you must also come with gifts and so on.
Yeah.
Now, remember, the Dutch had been part of the slave trade, and they had enslaved people in the Cape. And the people they enslaved were Africans. Now, here is an African saying we must come and seek permission. And they couldn't take it.
It was the other way around.
Yes, so they couldn't take it. They decided, no, we're going to come here and take this, whatever we want here, because these guys have been under us all the time. And so Mzilikazi saw that and he attacked them.
Oh.
And that's how that's how that battle happened at Verkop. And so after that, of course, the Dutch retaliated. That's how they attacked Mzilikazi at Moseja.
Oh, at Moseja.
And that's where you have the battle of Moseja. Yes.
I've seen the areas just then, Boziras.
Yes. So after they attacked Mzilikazi, they then went down, basically celebrating because they got some cattle.
From Mzilikazi.
And then they started a place which they called Winbeck, because they said they had won against Mzilikazi. Venberg, And so then they were waiting basically for Piet Retief. They thought Piet Retief were going to come. They were going to join hands and attack Mzilikazi until they get rid of him. But unfortunately, history changed. Piet Retief was killed by Dingaan. And that's how.
Yes,
basically
it's a famous story. Abatagaat.
Yes.
Piet Retief. Okay. So there was a big connection. I mean, Moseja is here and Piet Retief were killed. Way down there, Dingaan in Zululand.
Yes, because there was this group.
Guys traveled.
This group broke out because all the time we were given an impression that Boers work together in unison. We failed to work together.
Yeah.
It's not true.
They were all in groups.
They were in groups. That's why the one group went towards Natal, which is where Piet Retief was killed.
Yeah, he was killed. And the others came to Transvaal.
So they were waiting for him, and Piet Retief decided that no, he was going to go there. And there was a pastor that was busy negotiating on his behalf, Dingaan, to say, no, we want to build here and so on. And, at that time, Mzilikazi also had been attacked. And after Mzilikazi was attacked by Dingaan, that's where the Boers saw that, no man, but this guy is not invincible. Because they were not sure whether they must go and attack there.
They were unsure of his strength and whether they would be wiped out themselves.
Absolutely. It's only after Dingaan attacked that they saw that, no, but we can also do it. And that's how the Battle of Moseja happened.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
After Moseja?
After Moseja, as you can see how close Moseja is to
Botswana. Yes, that's where we're coming now.
Yes. My take...
And Moseja, just for the viewers, could be 100 or so kilometers from the Lobatse border, around that.
Absolutely.
Maybe even less.
Yes, maybe
it's
even
not too
less.
Far, maybe even less.
Yes.
Yeah.
So from the ground research, though Mzilikazi was chased out of Pitsidi Suleyang, which is further north from Moseja, yes. Which is where he settled after the Moseja.
Okay.
battle.
Oh, he didn't go across to Lobatse right there. He actually went up north.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the other issue is that, remember, Mzilikazi was a military man. And he had a lot of military strategies. And one of them was to send people up front to go investigate what is happening.
to reconnoiter.
Yes, he always did that reconnaissance.
Yeah.
And to make sure that
as we move,
he knows
they
what's
know what's
happening.
going on there. No, it's not a drone.
No, absolutely. So I take it that he must have also been having some level of settlement in what is today called Botswana, whilst he was in Mosega. Because he was pushed out of Pitsidisuleyang in 1838.
Yes, I remember Mosega was around 1837.
That's
I remember
correct.
that from my little history.
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
correct. Yeah. So now, 1838, he moved out of there into Botswana. Out of the records of the Boers, they say that they chased him up to Tswapong Hills. Now they say Tswapong Hills next to Gaborone, which
That's
you can
quite a
see
distance,
is
yeah.
not it's not correct.
Yeah, no, that cannot be correct. Yeah.
And somehow also, as I think when people look at the geography, would give a bit of confusion because it says Tswapong Central District. So I think to a person who's not very familiar with the geography will think Central District is talking about closer to where the town is.
Yes, which is totally wrong.
Which is incorrect. So they say they chased him up to there, and then they prayed and came back to South Africa.
South Africa, yeah.
But then my take is that because Mzilikazi would have already been into what is today Botswana, he already started to move even further north because his movements were right up to Maung. He was there. In fact, when you listen to Izibongo Zenkosi, bathi bude utshani mahalihali. They are talking of mahalihali. So bude utshani, the grass is long.
Yeah.
But abushi nogusha. It's not even burning. But they say umhlabuyosha. Buyosha with the loins, the lion, because it means it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is a confirmation that the movements were right up to that area.
Okay.
In the Maung. And incidentally, when we were doing ground research, we found that there are even tourist companies in Maung that are called Mzilikazi.
Really?
Yes. They say they're still continuing on the path of Mzilikazi. And now, then my take is that at that stage, Mzilikazi had actually established an empire because he is from Maung right further down to Lobatse.
Because I want you to connect Lobatse because
Yes. Yes.
Hey.
No. So, and my take is also that Mzilikazi did not personally go to all those areas.
Yes,
He would have
sent his, because apparently he had different armies, whatever you want to call it, that went in different areas.
Yes.
Apparently he left, according to your research, he left with about 500 soldiers when he left Zululand.
Yes,
but later on he got up to about 15,000, some huge numbers.
Yes, they were because remember, also when he was coming and capturing people with this defensive state,
joined.
He was getting them to join.
Got you.
Yeah, and he made them to be in different categories because the people that he moved with from Natal, he's considered them to be the best fighters. So they were closest to him. And he could actually, when there's issues, he would then get them to be positioned differently in terms of what they must do and how they must do it. Now, the areas that he went to, he was also ensuring that he was accumulating his economy. And the economy at that time was cattle. And now he was particularly interested in certain cattle of different colors, particularly white, because the white cattle were like royal cattle.
Okay.
And also, if you look at the shields that are used, they are of different colors. And the different shields are for different regiments. Because just from looking at the color of the shield, you know which regiment that person belongs to.
Got you.
The black and white, the red, the black. And also because with the cattle, when they were doing sacrifices, different type color cattle were used for different sacrifices. And so on. And so what then happened is that as he was searching for these cattle and sending his men went to right up to what is today called Lobatse. And Batswana ya no ba bona, because Batswana have not been known to be the best of warriors. But
you are part of us.
I acknowledge that.
Yeah, acknowledge
the issue of, which is why when some people talk about some of the battles which were fought even before the guns did, because Botswana, they definitely did get to defend their land quite fiercely with Ghana. But before then, when it was combat, hand to hand with short spears or what, and javelins, no. That was not
maybe
very...
it's because for a while, the battles of the Mfekani and all that, so to speak, we were still very much protected from those. So we stayed. Remember, you talked about how the Zulu areas and all those, they were very peaceful.
No, absolutely.
Maybe now we retain that a bit more than others because we didn't have that influence of the settlers and the Voortrekkers.
I agree. Absolutely.
Am I
no,
right?
That is correct. Yeah. Because, then the concentration was on other things.
That's, yes.
For instance, Barolo Babizwa Babinatsipi, because they've been mining iron for the longest time. So that is what, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even from Botswana, where there's a place called Totswe Mogala, which is where those people back or Lehuruti are said to be originally coming from.
Okay.
But they mined iron in Lehuruti after they had been mining iron here for the longest of years and making bangles and moving with Madikwe, Mulepolole, going towards various lands to go and trade what they had. So,
yes, now going into the Kalahari, you got a Barolon there as well.
Absolutely. So they were engaged with different things and not warfare. And so it is understandable when they were not a vicious people and people of war, which is almost the same thing as the Tonga, the Tsonga, and the Ronga people, who when Soshangani found them, he found them to be traders because they were also living near the trade route, which was used by the Portuguese.
Yes, and along the rivers where trade was easier.
Yes. So they were not they were not militarized.
So tell us about Lobatse. We were chatting about how I usually tease young people about what the name Lobatse means. To stop calling it Lobatse, because it's not Lobatse, it's Lobatse. Lobatse Khomotse.
Yes.
And it was because of when Mzilikazi encroached.
Yes, absolutely. When he got there and he found, of course, the people there were just generally volunteering their cattle over to the tax collectors, because that's what they were called, Mzilikazi. Go there and collect the cattle. So now they were deciding that, no, we are not going to be impoverished like this. We must hide some of these cattle so that he must get them. He mustn't get them. So they will say Lobatse.
Lobadi
Khomotse. Because in Lobatse there is a gorge not far from the central town.
Okay. It's around there, that hilly area by town.
Yes. Okay. So they were basically putting those cattle in that gorge so that they must be hidden away. And then the ones which just become conspicuous are the ones they can take. So Lobatse from Lobatse. Yes.
And then they passed, and then
the other interesting thing is that when he got to a place which today is known as Kanye, unless if you know a meaning of Kanye.
No, I got from your book Kanye or something. I don't know. Just tell us about it. How the Kanye?
Yes.
Because that one I didn't know.
Yes.
I know Ramotswa, Lobatse, and the other ones, Palapse, what the names come from. But Kanye, I've never.
Kanye, when Mzilikazi got there, they say he was getting a bit impatient with the people. And he was saying Zoshaya Ganye. Ganye
which
means once. All at once. I will not and ngizawukhuluma kanye. So I'll only speak once. Yeah. So Batswana ga ba utlwa kanye, it didn't really make sense. No ke kanye we una bua ka kanye.
That's how the name Kanye came about.
The name came about.
Okay, interesting.
And what is interesting is that when I was here in 2022 thereabout, and I met a number of our Kalanga brothers. All of them were saying, did you know? Do you know the story about Kanye?
Oh.
Yes, and how it came about. And I
They
said,
knew it.
yes.
Okay, because I haven't come across anybody who has explained Kanye for me.
Yes. So they were quite excited when they heard that. No, I knew about that. They said, "No, so you really getting deep in research." I said, "No, I was getting lost in it."
And then Ndebele, Baramotswa. And you met Khosi Mosadi, you mentioned. And how does Mzilikazi relate to Ramotswa again? Le babidwa ba malete gore ba
letisitswe ke Mzilikazi. What Mzilikazi did from his military strategy again is that as he was moving forward, because they are not the only baleti in across the story of Mzilikazi. They are also called Balindi, which means the same issue.
Okay.
Is in Ndebele, in different areas.
Okay.
Even right up to the north, closer to Zimbabwe.
Balindi.
Yes.
Same concept.
Same concept. Because he was making a rear guard. And say, you guys, you stay here. You become part of the rear guard so that if anything goes wrong where I'm going, I'm coming to either fetch you to help me fight there, or I'll come and settle with you.
Was a military strategy.
Military strategy.
So, Giba
Kumalo, yes. And they say in their own diboko, they have an acknowledgement of Ndebele. Yes.
No, they do. How about you poka bare ke batswana ba Matebenyana ba bantshonyana ba Ndebele.
Bare ga ba ipoka gape ba re Ndebele nnete, but they actually say that ke Masulu. Yes, because as you would know, there is no Z in the Tswana language.
Yes, that's correct.
Which is what we found when we also went to Molapo Abujang, that they have written Mzilikazi as Mzilikazi. Yes. Even in next to Muruleng, we have got a village which is called Ramosselekazi. Yes.
He was all over.
He was.
Now, there's something that you need to clarify for us. Why, from our history, from our parents and elders, we came to know Mzilikazi as a violent rogue who was passing, we were as a faithful, killing people. I mean, there was even explicit discussions where they will put babies modikike. I mean, why was that? You talk about a king, a responsible king, conquering, and all that. How do these match?
Yeah. Okay, it takes us back to the first narrative of the people who were making the history and the reason that it was made. So that also when you doubt that, you go and check it in a book, you find, or no, it says that this is what he did. When you go on the ground, you find a completely different narrative. You find that actually Mzilikazi used to take bana. That is a fact. And bana ba kose in particular. And the reason he was doing that is that he knew that you are not going to attack him because now you know you are putting your own children at risk. So he took Mahosi out, and I found a lot of people who were acknowledging that he took our children, even from Ndebele.
Oh.
Yes. That they complained that Mzilikazi wathatha abantwana, he took our children, and he would take bakose hosi because. But what he was doing, which is something very particular here, even in Botswana, some of the children that he took from the royal house, afterwards, when they knew that the child was of a particular age, they went and asked for them. And banaba ba busiwa.
Okay.
And ba fitla ba tlo busa with the same type of approach that Mzilikazi was using. And, then there is also connections between Mzilikazi and those different people. Because I tell you something which is very interesting, which probably you know or you don't know. That Ndebele, as they are called, were actually not Ndebele. So they were not Zulu. They were not Ndebele.
Because I was going to ask you, what's this Ndebele name? Where does it come from? Because we've talked Kumalo, we've talked There's no mention of
no.
Ndebele.
Even in their praise names, there's no Ndebeles, nothing like that. He's actually, the Ndebele was a nickname, just like Shaka. And it stuck. Because after he conquered, because Ndebele were actually the original Ndebele, were from the family of Musi and Mhlanga. So bo Mahlangu, ba eleng gore mo rona mo Northwest mo go na le Batlhaku ke bo batho ba bo Mahlangu.
Ba ra Matlhaku.
So now what has then happened with all that is that when he conquered this Ndebele, like ba kereng ke ba Mahlangu, their descendants tsa Msi ka Mhlanga, right? And so these children, ba ne gore ne le ba Manala and Zunza, which were two of the children, ba ka bogosi, as is normally happens. So they then were not in agreement, and then they stayed in two different places. But when Mzilikazi attacked, he attacked both of them at different times. He found Banzunza Pele, who and he found the descendant Sabona, who was called Makotongo, in the area almost close to Stoffberg in South Africa. And then he found Manala, who were the descendants Sabona, which was Sibindi. And now he took the children of Sibindi, took the children of Makotongo, and some of them he killed, which is a fact. Because the other issue is that, which, like I was saying earlier, we cannot run away from the fact that there was also quite a bit of violence that was happening at those times. So Mzilikazi was in no way a saint. But the issues that he was encountering and the violence that he was also meting out, at times was violence he was returning. But then a lot of people, just like Ndebele, they decided not to fight, because they decided that they saw that this is going to be a very bad ending. So when he captured those Ndebele soldiers and they were approaching, people were seeing Ndebele. And that's how they were called Ndebele. But they are not Ndebele. And because there are other people who say that, no, they were called Ndebele because they berekisa dithebe tse telele. You know?
Yes,
but the issue is that,
yes,
they were actually...
the shields, just to know,
those shields, yes. Yes. But dithebe zinde. That's why bareki Ndebele. No,
okay.
No, they were named after the original Ndebele. Yeah. So now, when they come through to the areas that they then settled in, you would find that he continued with the same notion. That the nickname that he got, which is not there in the in these praise singings, is an acknowledgement that he was not Ndebele.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Very interesting. No, we are coming towards the end here. No?
Sure.
So I wanted to, as we sum up, because it's a big story. As
yes.
You know, we haven't even reached Zimbabwe and Zambia, which we can do some other time.
Right.
But I wanted to, because I want, especially Botswana, Botswana, to just say from a leadership significance of appreciating a leader like Mzilikazi and learning. Even in the West, there were leaders who were violent and good, and it was because of the dynamics of the time.
Yes.
You know, we can't come when you're looking. We're talking things of 200 years ago.
Absolutely.
And so that's way back.
Yeah.
So how would you say Botswana should respond to a king like Mzilikazi in a nation building type purpose, if you may?
Okay. Just on the tail end of the first part, just to mention around the issues, Ndebele, because of the way they were made up, they were also starting to make up even their own language. Do you know that Ratswale in Setebele sa ko Zimbabwe ubitswa Sebele?
Ratswale, ubitswa Sebele?
Sebele.
I didn't know that.
because one Mzilikazi's son, one of the people that he got married to was Sibyle's daughter. Yes.
Sibili.
Babakwena.
Oh.
So now, because ke ratswale Sibili,
Yes.
now
Yes.
ha ba bua ka ena ba re o Sibili.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even in their conversations, it's very interesting. You said,
you pick that up.
yeah, Sibili. They talk to you. You know. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's basically a choreographed language out of that.
Historiographer.
Yeah. Now, I think one of the things that you can learn out of
and just before you come in,
yeah.
I mean, we don't even have any commemoration of. I mean, one thing that really sad about like a Botswana context, and I think you mentioned it in your book or one of the podcasts you've done, how when you go to the statue of Paul Kruger,
yes,
you know, you can see
correct.
It's well looked after.
Yes.
The museums are fantastic, but I mean, our museum here, it's a really sad case in terms of capturing the essence of where Botswana come from.
Sure.
I mean, we talked about the Battle of Dimawe, which was a big turnover. Yeah, Botswana, the modern day Botswana. We said it would have looked different had King Mzilikazi been defeated by the Boers.
Yes.
But you go there, you say, that.
Wow.
I mean, that's a sad thing.
Yeah.
You hear more about David Livingstone compared to Sicele. You hear more about David Livingstone goodies compared to Mzilikazi.
Yes.
So that's really where I'm coming from, and I'm saying this. How do we commemorate? How do we use it for nation building? You know, that type of thing.
Yeah. It comes again to how we teach and what we teach. In Zimbabwe itself, when you go to Matopos, you hear more of the grave of Cecil John Rhodes.
And it's there. His statue is there, isn't it, as well?
And Mzilikazi's grave is nearby.
And it's like, by the way type thing.
Yes. And what is interesting, Ramsford said that when Cecil John Rhodes asked to be buried next to Mzilikazi, it was an acknowledgement, a psychological acknowledgement from Rhodes that he's actually lower than Mzilikazi. Because he asked to be buried there next to Mzilikazi.
Is there?
Yes.
Was his request?
Yes. Because he died in Cape Town.
That's what I was,
And he was
transported all the way.
Put in a train. And to be buried next to Mzilikazi. So,
and David Livingstone said good things about Mzilikazi as well, isn't it? As a leader.
But I'm still searching where Mzilikazi met with David Livingstone. Because he said he's the second greatest African leader I've met.
Yeah.
So I've
but you can't see you haven't found any connection.
I was even in Kuruman where they've written the history there on the wall. And I thought I'd see somewhere where it say on such and such a day I met Mzilikazi.
No, you don't see anything.
Because I know Mzilikazi never went to Kuruman. He sent his emissaries there. So yeah,
go Moffat.
I could maybe
Robert Moffat.
Spiritually. I will still find it. I'll still probably find the book because that's the quote which is very popular. So yeah, you can see the level of responsibility that we have around these things in terms of our heritage and taking care of it. You know, in the book I'm busy with now, I talk about the Nana of Jamaica. Who came originally out of Ghana. They've got some of the currency in Jamaica, they've got her face there. You know, that's how you commemorate a person, a leader, a great leader. Because she was one of the people who fought against, you know, they had the people that they called the Maroons. You know, the Maroons were people who refused to be enslaved in the diaspora. So that is how strong she was in terms of pushing that. Most of our people are basically grounded to nothing. You know, the three kings, fortunately, in Botswana are there.
Yes, that we've commemorated.
Yeah, even in the currencies.
Yes, they're there.
You know?
They're there.
But I think we can do more. You know, our heritage, because in Senegal, for instance, there's a lot of cultural tourism that happens. And especially with the economy tanking as it is in Southern Africa, cultural heritage can be an anchor of that. I mean, we went to Molapo wa Bojang. You know, you can see some basic things that are required out of there to help that and to draw people to pass there. Otherwise, a person drives all the way from Kanye, right to Lubatse, there is nothing.
There's nothing.
There is absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But there is history which is hidden right there.
Even Kanye Gaborone, that's where Dimawe and the area where the battle was. People should be saying, I'm going to go this way because I'm going to pass.
Correct.
That's where the David Livingstone tree was also there, where he camped.
Yeah. So we have got that responsibility. And I mean, this is one of the things that I'm also in my small way trying to do with speaking to the Arts and Culture Department in South Africa to say, I think we can do better. That very site where Mzilikazi killed the Griquas, I spent 2 days looking for it, going up and down, putting on my GPS. And it says you are 20 meters away. When I look, it says you are now
because there's nothing there.
A kilometer away. Yes, but there's Verkop Road. So I got to Verkop Road. I thought I was getting close. Then I decided, no, I must come the next day because now it's getting dark. But there's nothing. There is absolutely nothing. In fact, in Mosega, I'm told Maburu want to put up their own monument to say they defeated Mzilikazi there.
Yeah.
You know, so the history
keeps on being twisted. You just see the cross, isn't it?
Yes.
Zaha Mzilikazi and the stone workings. That's the only thing that I've seen when I'm passing there.
And the rail line. That's about it. Yeah. So we this is a great responsibility that we have in our hands to make sure that we can safeguard, keep our history, and make it to be alive. I speak in the book about the statues of the past American presidents that you know that are created on up on the mountainside. You know, and people can always remember who those people are, the founders, and so on. We really don't do much about it. You know. Mantatisi is very, you know, it's people who are interested in history who get to know about her. But very little, you know, people get surprised when you talk about some of these things. But these histories are there and the pages have been taken out magically by those who were writing previously. Yeah.
I have to mention one of my favorite guys. This is the book for Molope on the King Mzilikazi, but there's another book that you refer quite a lot.
Yes.
And, my man, Eze Morolong. I mean, this is one man that I believe, Soul Plaji.
Tekisho.
I'd rather call him Tekiso. I even say Tekisho.
Yeah.
You know, Plaji. But this is a book that I've read some years back, and it's quite thick, so I keep visiting it.
Yes.
I mean, this is because I'm looking for the African philosophers, and I can tell you, this is one of, well-traveled. This is the guy who I think met W. Du Bois.
Absolutely.
He traveled in the States.
Even met Marcus Garvey.
Marcus Garvey as well. And he, you know, also the founders of ANC.
Yes.
He was political.
Yes.
You're talking about being educated.
Yeah.
Where you touch on biology, you touch on philosophy, you touch on social science. This is the guy who translated, you know, Shakespeare into Setswana, you know, and wrote books in Setswana. He was a very cultural person and he was also been to Gaborone.
No, he actually taught a lot in Botswana.
So
because at that time there were no books that were written in Setswana.
Correct.
Here in Botswana.
Yeah.
And he came quite a bit. In fact, he says it with a sore heart.
Yeah.
That he heard about people who knew because he liked writing about the Kai.
Setswana. He was a linguist as well.
And then he was referred to people deep in Botswana that he could talk to. And some of them, when he went, he found them that they had passed on. Which is what is said even today. And what is happening today is almost similar to what Sol Plaatje himself was experiencing, where people, publishers basically play a game with authors. You know, he used to travel with his manuscript wherever he went.
I know.
You know, and which is
very
exactly
rich.
what happens.
But I was like, why wasn't I taught about this man? You know, it never appeared anywhere in my history. You know, and this is, I'm just underscoring the problem that we have where we don't really study our own. And he was, I think you referred to him quite a bit in the book in terms of colonization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the first quote in the book, I take it from him.
From Sol Plaatje.
He says that when he grew up, he had an impression that Ndebele were violent for no reason until he got to know from his grandparents that, in fact, we are to blame for how Mzilikazi behaved. because he used to send his taxmen to collect tax at Kadikhomo. And we killed them. And one of them was Mboya. And once we killed them, Mzilikazi came and he attacked fiercely.
Is that why we colluded with the Boers?
Yes.
With Kolomorolo.
Yes. And then he says it. He says the Barolo are going to regret it. He says first you're going to be attacked by the black ants, and then later by the black ants. And by the red ants he meant Maburu, and by the black ants he meant Mzilikazi. And he said, after you collude with the Boers, the Maburu, you will cry until your tears meet at the bottom of your chin. Is it not happening?
Yeah, amazing
yeah,
stuff.
Absolutely.
No, thanks a lot. Just, I like you because you, at the beginning, I talked about the Sarazakama quotation. So I like the way you took it back to Marcus Garvey.
Yes,
Just as we come to the end, just talk about that Marcus Garvey quote.
Yes.
And then just on the end, just tell us a book that if our viewers, because a lot of them call back and they want to learn more.
Yes.
What one or two books that you will highly recommend in addition to this one? That again from the philosophy of what we just talked about.
Yes. Okay, maybe the second part first. The one thing that I found very fascinating is how our brothers in the diaspora have contributed positively to African history. Because they've been doing quite a bit of research. In fact, I was very lucky to be connected with one of them, Robin Walker, who's written a thick book, almost
thick like the
thicker than that, which is called When We Ruled. And it covers what Africans have done across the continent, in terms of their contribution to knowledge systems, to development and so on.
What's his name again? You said
Robin Walker.
Robin Walker.
Yes.
He's an American.
He's an American. Yeah.
Black American.
Yes.
Okay.
I was very lucky to be connected to him.
Wonderful.
They've got they've got seminars that they run. I've been attending most of them online.
And excellent.
Amazing stuff. They have got an excursion which they are doing currently, I think in August, where they are going to Ghana.
Wow.
And they are following that slave trade route, and they are giving lectures there. I will be joining the trip that they are taking to Egypt.
You said, okay.
Where they are going to be looking at the pyramids and some of the, even from the spiritual side of the Africans.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I like. All this from an African context.
Absolutely.
From an African filter.
Yes.
You're on a ride, man, huh? Looks like the ride is still killing on.
No.
And you're enjoying the ride.
When it bites you gotta stick.
It made me laugh in one of the words you said, hey, when I was involved with this book and the research, you have to go, insanity reaches you.
Absolutely. You have to be in a state of temporary insanity. No, absolutely. So in terms of
Robin?
Robin Walker.
Robin Walker, you got that?
Yeah.
Those who are very interested in the African perspective, what Africans have done, there's a recommendation from my brother here.
That book, it's written by those are some of the people that I give credit to. When you get a white author who researches to the extent of Hazel Crawford.
Hazel Crawford.
Yeah, she's written this book, The Sight of the Sun at Noon.
Yeah, The Sight of the Sun at Noon. I like that title.
Yes, which talks about even how Batlaping even ended up trading with the Arabs. How Batlaping were making knives, different type of knives, which when the Dutch met them, they were trying to boast, but no, look at what we've done. We can trade with you. Baba Fadi Tipa and Batlaping Barao. Your knife cuts on one side. Our knife cuts on both sides. We're not impressed. And it's even got a handle which
nice handle.
Yeah, which is made of different stones and so on. So that you cannot tell us of. She's the one who talks about how the route that was followed, even by the Khoi, right up to where they met with several interesting characters. It's a very, very interesting book. And then maybe the book which is called The Destruction of Black Civilization, which talks about why is it that after Africa had been the ones that had been leading in development in the continent, fell back.
Yeah.
And he says that the issues of what Europe did, from the destroying and discarding the museums in Egypt and coming further south, he says that the Africans were building and the Europeans were destroying. They built again, they destroyed again. And he says that's exactly what had been happening for hundreds of years.
Like the library in Alexandria.
Absolutely. And so he says, then, if you know this take out of psychology where they say that needs are hierarchical. You first start with the...
Maslow's
hierarchy.
Hierarchy of needs.
Absolutely. So he says the Africans were then now so confined to looking after their safety needs because they were always being chased around. And so they did not have the time to
self-actualize and go up the hierarchy.
Absolutely.
They had to stay with security and shelter and clothing.
Correct. So he
That's
says,
an interesting book.
At the beginning, they were much more that is where they had built Kemet. Because they had
actually came down.
Yes. And the other thing, which is what, then they must also look for a book by Sheikh Anta Diop. With Sheikh Anta Diop, they must look for anything.
He's a prolific writer.
He's absolutely amazing. I mean, the DNA which has been done today, which is searched out of people who are burnt, actually comes out of the researches which was done by Sheikh Anta Diop.
Okay.
He did that as a...
Is he an African?
He's an African from Senegal.
Diop,
yes. In fact, the university in Senegal today is named after him. Sheikh Anta Diop University. What he then did, he took the remains out of the DNA, and he researched, and out of that he proved that the Africans out of Kemet were black. They were, and in fact, that is why even Kemet was called like that, ancient Egypt. Because Kemet means the land of the blacks.
Oh, the land of the blacks.
Yes.
Okay.
And it shows that the knowledge actually came more out of Sudan and moved into Egypt. And the destabilization is happening even up today. That's why there is no peace in Sudan even up to today. Because the people were moved from further up to north, from north to south. And the Arabs occupied that. Because the Arabs in the whole of North Africa, what they call the Maghreb.
The Maghreb, yes.
Was once a part of Black Africa. Now they call it Arab Africa and Africa in the what do you call it, in the south. Which makes a nonsense of the whole thing. Because when you ask people, okay, you say Egypt is for the Arabs, but where is Egypt? Then they say it is in the fast, in the near south or the near. Where is
Middle
that?
East, what?
Middle East. Middle of what East? So that's what I would say. And I really want to encourage our people not to also take what I say for to be the gospel truth.
No, they should also challenge it and find their own truth.
Yeah,
and that's how you grow. That's how the knowledge grows.
Absolutely, and read. And The Lie of 1652 is one other book that I found to have been very interesting.
There's actually a book title like that, The Lie of 1652.
The Lie of 1652 by Patrick Terich.
Okay.
Yes, I also quoted.
You quoted, who talks about the other people that came before Van Riebeeck, isn't it? Thousands of ships, apparently.
Absolutely, that used to pass there looking for pepper. That's why there's a book, there's an expression in Afrikaans which says pepper deer.
What does that mean?
Pepper is pepper.
Okay.
Deer is expensive. So because of them having been going to India for quite some time,
for trading. And
the price of pepper kept on going up. So the Dutch were saying, this thing is now pepper.
Marcus Garvey.
Marcus Garvey, yes.
Let's end on that good note.
Absolutely. Marcus Garvey had a major impact on the founders of Africa, those of 63. Unfortunately, they never quite agreed. They got to be the Monrovia part, and so they were in two groups. The one group was saying that let's get Africa to be Africans and to unite now.
Yeah.
And to take over the continent. And others said, no, let's go slowly. So they made, and that was the one that won.
That won the day.
Yes. And so Marcus Garvey was basically moving with this whole issue of Africa for Africans, both at home and abroad, which is then he was talking about the diaspora. So, and he was very emphatic on the notion that if a man without roots is like a tree, a man without a history is like a tree without roots and is bound to die. Because if you don't know where you come from, you will not know where you're going. Just like John Henrik Clarke says, he says, history is like our compass, which tells us of our human geography. And it tells us where we have been and where we must go. So if you don't know where you have been, you will never know why you are here and where you must go. So that quotation of Rese Esretsakama is, as you can hear, it's God that
those elements
that come out of Marcus Garvey. The Mnandi of Nigeria was talking the same thing. Kwame Nkrumah talking the same thing. Nyerere, same thing. So they had all of that. Saul Blakey was then also talking the same thing as all of those people. But like John Henrik Clarke says, he says we must check where we lost the compass. Yeah. Because we have definitely lost it.
Lost the compass. And people like you are trying to get us to find where we're coming from and where we lost the compass. Because then we get a new direction, isn't it?
I'm humbled.
Yeah,
I'm
beautiful.
humbled. Thank you very much.
Beautiful, Ramon. This has been really great. And there we go. Very different again. Molope all the way from Moruleng in South Africa. Historiographer, as he just taught me a new word in history. So I hope you really enjoyed that. And I did for sure. And I'm hopefully that he also enjoyed. And please, as usual, let's subscribe, share this as much as you can so that GrowthWell can keep growing. Sidiba Samitsia Molemo. Enjoy and have a good day.